This is the sleepy history of everyday things, and trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll never look at a paper clip, a doorknob, or even your morning coffee cup the same way again. Let's start with something sitting on your desk right now, the paperclip. This tiny piece of bent wire seems so simple, so obvious that you'd think it's been around forever, but the paperclip as we know it is barely 125 years old, and its creation sparked one of the most ridiculous patent wars in history. Before the paperclip, people used ribbons, string, or straight pins to hold papers together. Imagine the frustration of constantly pricking your fingers or having your important documents tied up like Christmas presents. The need for a better solution was desperate. The story begins in 1867 when Samuel B. Fay received the first patent for a bent wire paper fastener in the United States. But Fay's design looked nothing like our modern paperclip. It resembled more of a decorative pin with loops, designed primarily to attach tickets to fabric. The breakthrough came in the 1890s, during what we might call the Great Paperclip Innovation Boom. Dozens of inventors were simultaneously working on the same problem. In 1892, William Middlebrook patented a machine for making wire paperclips, though he didn't patent the clip design itself, a mistake that would prove costly. Then came the gem paperclip, patented by William Middlebrook in 1899. This is the design we know and love today, that perfect double loop that holds papers securely without damaging them. But here's where the story gets interesting. The gem wasn't actually called the gem initially, and no one knows exactly who designed the specific shape we use today. The name gem came from the British company Gem Manufacturing Limited, which began producing this style of clip in the early 1900s. Meanwhile, in America, the Cushman and Denison Company was selling the same design under different names. Patent battles raged for years, with multiple inventors claiming credit for the same basic design. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the paperclip story isn't about its invention. It's about its unexpected role as a symbol of resistance. During World War II, Norwegians wore paperclips on their lapels as a subtle sign of resistance against Nazi occupation. The clip represented unity and solidarity, many small parts coming together to hold something larger in place. It was such an effective symbol that the Nazis eventually banned the wearing of paperclips. Today we produce over 11 billion paperclips annually worldwide. They've become so ubiquitous that we rarely think about them, yet they represent one of humanity's most elegant solutions to a simple problem. The paperclip is a testament to the idea that the best inventions are often the simplest ones, solutions so obvious that we wonder why no one thought of them sooner. Now, let's move from your desk to your dining table, where salt and pepper shakers sit so naturally that you'd never question their existence. But these humble condiment containers have a history filled with luxury, superstition, and surprising innovation. Salt, first of all, was once so valuable, it was literally worth its weight in gold. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt, which is where we get the word salary from the Latin salarium. For most of human history, salt was a luxury item, carefully measured and jealously guarded. The wealthy displayed their salt in elaborate containers called salts, ornate vessels that sat prominently on the table as symbols of status. The phrase "above the salt" comes from medieval dining arrangements, where high-status guests sat near the ornate salt container at the head of the table, while lower-status individuals sat below the salt. Pepper, meanwhile, was even more precious. During the Middle Ages, peppercorns were accepted as currency, and a pound of pepper could buy a sheep. The spice was so valuable that it was sometimes given as dowry payments, or used to pay rent. So when did these precious commodities get relegated to simple shakers? The transformation began in the 19th century, with several key innovations. First, the Industrial Revolution made both salt and pepper much more affordable and widely available. Second, the development of anti-caking agents made salt flow freely from containers. Before this, salt would clump together in humid conditions, making it nearly impossible to sprinkle. The modern salt shaker was patented by John Landis Mason in 1858. Yes, the same Mason who invented the mason jar. His design included a perforated top, that allowed for easy sprinkling. But it was the Morton Salt Company that really revolutionized salt distribution in 1911, with their famous slogan, "When it rains it pours," and the addition of magnesium carbonate to prevent clumping. Pepper mills, interestingly, are much older than pepper shakers. The first pepper mills appeared in France in the 1840s, designed to grind peppercorns fresh. The pepper shaker came later, as people began using pre-ground pepper for convenience. The pairing of salt and pepper as the default table seasonings is actually a relatively recent Western phenomenon. In many cultures, the standard table seasonings might be soy sauce and chili oil, or olive oil and vinegar. The salt and pepper combination became standard in Europe during the 17th century and spread worldwide through colonization and cultural influence. Here's a fun detail that most people never notice. Salt shakers typically have more holes than pepper shakers. This isn't universal, but it's common because salt grains are finer and require more holes to flow properly, while pepper's larger particles can be dispensed through fewer, larger holes. The design variations are endless and often culturally specific. In Japan, you might find tiny ceramic shakers shaped like Mount Fuji. In Mexico, salt and pepper might be served in molcachete-style stone containers. The simple act of seasoning food has inspired thousands of creative designs worldwide, but perhaps the most interesting aspect of salt and pepper shakers is how they've become a unit. They're sold as pairs, displayed as pairs, and we instinctively feel something is wrong when we see just one. They've become one of the most collected items in the world, with some collectors owning thousands of pairs. There's even a name for this hobby. Delteologist is someone who collects salt and pepper shakers. Let's talk about something that's probably sitting right next to those salt and pepper shakers: the fork. Today, using a fork is so natural that we teach it to toddlers as a basic life skill. But this simple utensil was once considered scandalous, unnecessary, and even blasphemous. Humans have been using tools to eat for thousands of years. Knives are among our oldest implements, and spoons have been found in archaeological sites dating back 25,000 years. But the fork is the newcomer to the party, and it faced serious resistance. The earliest forks appeared in ancient Egypt, and were used for cooking, not eating. These were large, two-pronged implements used to handle meat over fires. The idea of using a smaller version for eating didn't catch on for millennia. The dining fork made its debut in the Byzantine Empire around the 7th century. These early forks were delicate, two-pronged affairs made of gold or silver, and they were primarily used by royalty for eating certain fruits or sweets, foods that might stain the fingers. The fork's introduction to Western Europe is one of the most fascinating stories of cultural resistance you'll ever hear. In 1184, a Byzantine princess named Maria Argyropoulina married Giovanni Orsolino, the Doge of Venice. Maria brought with her many Byzantine customs, including the use of a golden fork for eating. The Venetians were horrified. Local clergy denounced the fork as an affront to God. Why would humans need artificial implements when God had given them perfectly good fingers? They called it a sign of excessive vanity and luxury. When Maria died of plague just 2 years after her marriage, many saw it as divine punishment for her unnatural eating habits. This attitude persisted for centuries. In 1611, English traveler Thomas Courier wrote about encountering forks in Italy, describing them with fascination, but also noting the ridicule he faced when he tried to use them back in England. His friends mocked him with the nickname Furcifer, which meant fork bearer, but was also a term for a scoundrel. The Catholic Church actively opposed forks for centuries, declaring them an insult to God's design. The reasoning was theological. Humans were created in God's image, and their hands were divinely designed for eating. To use artificial extensions was to suggest that God's creation was somehow inadequate. Forks didn't become common in France until the 17th century, when King Louis endorsed their use. Even then, they were initially considered feminine. Real men ate with their hands and knives. The early French forks had just 2 prongs, and were quite small, barely larger than modern dessert forks. The transition to 3, and then 4 prongs, happened gradually. 2-pronged forks were difficult to use. Food would slip between the tines, and the fork would often rotate in your hand. Italian craftsmen began adding a 3rd prong in the 18th century, and the four-pronged fork became standard by the 8th. America was particularly late to adopt forks. The Pilgrims ate with spoons, knives, and their hands. Forks didn't become common in America until the mid-18th century, and even then, they were considered a luxury item. George Washington owned several silver forks, but they were status symbols rather than everyday utensils. The Industrial Revolution finally democratized the fork. Mass production made them affordable, and changing social customs made them acceptable. By the late 1800s, proper table manners required fork use, and children were taught elaborate rules about which fork to use for which course. Today's dining etiquette rules about forks would seem bizarre to our ancestors. The American style of eating, cutting with the right hand, then switching the fork to the right hand to eat, developed because early Americans had to share utensils. The European style of keeping the fork in the left hand was only possible when everyone had their own set. The material evolution of forks tells its own story. Early forks were made of wood, bone, or precious metals. The invention of stainless steel in the early 20th century revolutionized fork production, making them durable, affordable, and hygienic. But here's something most people don't know. The number of prongs on a fork has cultural significance. In Thailand, traditional meals use only a spoon and fork, with the fork used primarily to push food onto the spoon. In some parts of Europe, fish forks traditionally have 3 prongs because 4-pronged forks were thought to impart a metallic taste to delicate fish. Every day, you probably turn dozens of doorknobs without giving them a second thought. But this simple mechanism represents centuries of innovation in security, craftsmanship, and social control. The doorknob isn't just a way to open doors, it's a miniature masterpiece of engineering, with a surprisingly complex social history. Before doorknobs, doors were opened with latches, bars, or simple rope pulls. The earliest doors didn't even have handles. They were held closed by gravity, friction, or simple wooden bars. The concept of a rotating mechanism to operate a latch was revolutionary. The first doorknob patent was filed in 1878 by Osborne Dorsey, an African-American inventor, whose contribution to this everyday object is often overlooked in historical accounts. However, rotating door handles had been used in wealthy European homes since the 16th century, crafted individually by skilled metalworkers. The mass production of doorknobs began during the Industrial Revolution, and it quickly became apparent that this simple object could serve multiple purposes. A doorknob wasn't just functional, it was decorative, it indicated status, and it could even be a form of artistic expression. Victorian-era doorknobs were elaborate affairs. Wealthy homeowners commissioned knobs made from crystal, porcelain, bronze, or even precious metals. The designs ranged from simple geometric patterns to elaborate floral motifs or family crests. The doorknob became a way to announce your taste and status before visitors even entered your home. But doorknobs also served a darker purpose: social control. In the antebellum South, enslaved people were often forbidden from having doorknobs on their quarters. The ability to lock a door, or even to have privacy, was considered a privilege reserved for free people. Similarly, in many company towns during the Industrial Revolution, workers' housing was built without interior doorknobs, reinforcing the message that privacy was not guaranteed. The mechanics of a doorknob are more complex than they appear. The standard doorknob contains a spring-loaded latch mechanism that retracts when the knob is turned. This system has to be precisely calibrated. Too loose, and the door won't stay closed. Too tight, and it's difficult to operate. The engineering challenge is significant when you consider that a doorknob might be operated thousands of times per year for decades. Different cultures developed different approaches to door hardware. In Japan, traditional doors slide rather than swing, so the concept of a turning handle was foreign until Western influence arrived. Chinese doors often used ring handles that lifted rather than turned. Middle Eastern doors frequently featured elaborate knockers rather than handles, reflecting cultural attitudes about privacy and hospitality. The standardization of doorknob height is a fascinating example of industrial design. The standard height of 36 inches from the floor was established in the early 20th century and represents a compromise between adult convenience and child safety. This height works for most adults while being high enough to prevent very young children from accidentally opening doors to dangerous areas. Materials matter more than you might think. Early doorknobs were often made of brass because it has antimicrobial properties. Brass naturally kills bacteria and viruses on contact. This wasn't understood scientifically at the time, but people noticed that brass fixtures stayed cleaner than other metals. During disease outbreaks, brass doorknobs likely prevented countless infections. The shape of doorknobs has evolved for practical reasons. The round knob that we consider standard is actually not the most efficient design. Lever handles require less grip strength and are easier for people with arthritis or disabilities to operate. This is why modern building codes increasingly require lever handles in public buildings. Security features embedded in doorknobs tell a story of changing social concerns. Early doorknobs had simple key locks, if any. Modern doorknobs might include multiple locking mechanisms, keyless entry, or even smart technology that can be controlled remotely. The evolution from simple latch to high-tech security device reflects our changing relationship with privacy and safety. Here's something that might surprise you. The direction a doorknob turns isn't arbitrary. In most Western countries, doorknobs turn clockwise to open, following the same logic as screws: righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. This standardization makes intuitive sense and prevents confusion, but it's not universal worldwide. Let's move from doors to clothing, with an invention that literally holds our wardrobes together: the zipper. This ingenious closure system seems so obvious today that it's hard to imagine a world without it. But the zipper took over 30 years to perfect, and another 20 years to gain widespread acceptance. Its story is one of persistence, innovation, and the gradual triumph of practicality over tradition. Before zippers, people relied on buttons, hooks, laces, and pins to fasten their clothing. Getting dressed, especially in formal wear, was often a lengthy process requiring assistance. Victorian women's dresses might have dozens of tiny buttons running up the back, impossible to fasten alone. The need for a faster, more convenient closure was obvious, but the solution proved elusive. The zipper's story begins in 1851 with Elias Howe, who also invented the sewing machine. Howe patented an automatic continuous clothing closure that used a series of clasps united by a connecting cord. But Howe was too busy promoting his sewing machine to develop his closure idea further, and his patent expired unused. The real breakthrough came from Whitcomb Judson, a mechanical engineer who was reportedly frustrated by having to help a friend with a back injury lace up his boots every day. In 1893, Judson patented the clasp locker, a complicated hook-and-eye system that could be fastened with a sliding mechanism. Judson's design was ingenious in concept, but problematic in execution. The closures frequently jammed, came apart unexpectedly, or refused to close properly. He spent years refining the design, eventually founding the Universal Fastener Company to manufacture his invention. Despite his efforts, the clasp locker was unreliable and expensive. The modern zipper was finally perfected by Gideon Sundback, a Swedish-American electrical engineer who joined Judson's company in Sundback's breakthrough came in 1913 with his hookless fastener. Instead of hooks and eyes, Sundback used interlocking metal cups that were joined and separated by a sliding mechanism. Sundback's design was revolutionary. He increased the number of fastening elements from 4 per inch to 10 or 11, making the closure much stronger and more reliable. He also developed the machinery to mass-produce the fasteners, bringing down the cost significantly. But even with a superior product, acceptance was slow. The fashion industry was conservative, and seamstresses were suspicious of the new technology. The first major customer wasn't clothing manufacturers, but the US military, which began using zippers on money belts and flying suits during World War I. The name zipper didn't come from the inventors. It was coined by B.F. Goodrich Company in 1923. Goodrich used Sundback's fasteners on rubber boots and liked the zip sound they made when opened or closed quickly. They marketed the boots as zippers, and the name stuck. Children's clothing was the zipper's breakthrough market. Parents loved how easy it was for kids to dress themselves, and children enjoyed the satisfying zip sound. By the 1930s, zippers were becoming common in children's pants, jackets, and dresses. Adult fashion took longer to embrace the zipper, particularly for formal wear. There was something perceived as mechanical or industrial about zippers that seemed inappropriate for elegant clothing. Buttons were traditional, familiar, and associated with craftsmanship. Zippers seemed too modern, too convenient. World War II changed everything. Metal rationing made buttons scarce. While zippers required less metal and could be produced more efficiently, the war effort demanded practical clothing that could be manufactured quickly. Suddenly, zippers weren't just convenient, they were patriotic. Post-war fashion embraced the zipper enthusiastically. Designers discovered that zippers could be decorative as well as functional. They experimented with colored zippers, oversized zippers, and zippers as design elements rather than hidden closures. The 1960s saw zippers become fashion statements in their own right. The invention of synthetic materials revolutionized zipper production. Nylon zippers, introduced in the 1960s, were lighter, more flexible, and available in any color. They made zippers practical for delicate fabrics and opened up new design possibilities. Today, we barely think about zippers, but their impact on society has been profound. They democratized fashion by making clothing easier to put on and take off without assistance. They enabled new styles of clothing that would be impossible with buttons or laces. They even changed architecture. Sleeping bags, tents, and luggage all depend on zipper technology. The engineering behind a zipper is more sophisticated than it appears. The teeth must be precisely aligned and shaped to interlock securely, while still allowing smooth operation. The slider mechanism contains several small parts that must work together perfectly thousands of times. The tape, or fabric backing, must be strong enough to withstand stress, while flexible enough to bend and curve. In your desk drawer right now, there's probably a wooden pencil, perhaps the most perfect writing instrument ever invented. This simple combination of graphite and wood has remained essentially unchanged for over 200 years, because it's nearly impossible to improve upon. The pencil's story spans continents, involves international trade disputes, and reveals how a simple tool can change the way humans communicate and learn. The pencil begins with a remarkable geological accident. In the early 1500s, a violent storm in Cumberland, England, uprooted a large oak tree and exposed a strange, dark mineral that locals had never seen before. This mineral left black marks that were perfect for marking sheep, and shepherds began using chunks of it as marking tools. What they had discovered was the purest deposit of graphite ever found, so pure that it could be used for writing without any processing. The English initially thought it was a form of lead and called it black lead or plumbago. The scientific name graphite comes from the Greek word graphine, meaning to write. This Cumberland graphite was extraordinary, so pure and soft that it could be cut into sticks and used directly for writing, but it was also incredibly valuable. The graphite was essential for making cannonballs. It was used to line the molds, and the English government quickly restricted access to the mines. Graphite was so precious that it was smuggled and sold on black markets across Europe. The first pencils were literally sticks of pure graphite, sometimes wrapped in string or held in metal holders to keep users' hands clean. But pure graphite was soft, messy, and expensive. The search for alternatives led to one of the most important innovations in writing technology. In 1795, Nicolas Jacques Conté, a French inventor, developed a process for mixing powdered graphite with clay and firing it in kilns. By varying the ratio of graphite to clay, he He could control the hardness of the resulting mixture. More clay created harder, lighter marks. More graphite created softer, darker marks. This is the system we still use today for grading pencil hardness. The wooden casing came about for practical reasons. Early graphite sticks were fragile and messy to handle. Various materials were tried as holders: metal, ivory, even precious stones. But wood proved ideal. It was cheap, easy to shape, held the graphite securely, and could be sharpened to a point. The choice of wood matters more than you might think. Cedar became the preferred material because it's soft enough to sharpen easily, but doesn't splinter. It also has a pleasant smell when sharpened. American manufacturers used Eastern red cedar, while European manufacturers preferred incense cedar from California. The familiar yellow color of pencils has a fascinating origin story. In the 1890s, the L&C Hardtmuth Company in Austria-Hungary wanted to advertise that their pencils contained the finest Chinese graphite. They painted their pencils yellow to associate them with Chinese royalty and good fortune. The marketing was so successful that yellow became the standard color for pencils worldwide. Mass production of pencils began in the 19th century and required solving several engineering challenges. The graphite core had to be centered perfectly in the wood casing. The wood had to be seasoned properly to prevent cracking, and the entire pencil had to be uniform in diameter and hardness. The metal ferrule, the band that holds the eraser, wasn't added until 1858, when American inventor Hyman Littman patented the combination of pencil and eraser. Europeans initially considered this combination crude. They preferred separate erasers, and felt that combining them suggested the writer expected to make mistakes. Pencil manufacturing became a symbol of industrial precision. Each pencil contained several carefully engineered components. The graphite core must be centered within 0.05 mm. The wood casing must be dried to exactly the right moisture content, and the paint must be applied evenly in multiple thin coats. The grading system for pencils reveals cultural differences in writing preferences. The American system uses numbers. 2 is standard, while the European system uses letters and numbers. HB is equivalent to American 2. These standards developed independently and reflect different priorities in writing instruments. World War II had a profound impact on pencil production. The war disrupted supply chains for both graphite and cedar. American manufacturers had to find alternative materials, leading to innovations in synthetic graphite and alternative woods. The war also increased demand for pencils, as they were essential for military communication and record-keeping. The environmental impact of pencil production is surprisingly complex. A single pencil requires resources from around the world: graphite from China or Mexico, clay from Germany, wood from California or Oregon, rubber from Southeast Asia, and metal from various sources. The carbon footprint of transporting these materials adds up significantly. Modern pencil manufacturing is highly automated, but the basic process remains unchanged. Wood is cut into slats, grooves are cut to hold the graphite cores, the cores are inserted, another slat is glued on top, and the resulting sandwich is cut into individual pencils. The entire process, from raw materials to finished pencil, can take several months due to the drying and curing time required. Despite the digital revolution, pencils remain remarkably popular. They're still considered the best tool for sketching, drafting, and situations where permanence isn't required. The ability to erase and correct makes pencils ideal for learning, which is why they remain standard in schools worldwide. Let's move from writing implements to personal hygiene with an exploration of the toothbrush, an object so essential to modern life that most people use one twice daily without ever wondering about its origins. The toothbrush's evolution reflects changing understanding of health, advances in materials, science, and shifting cultural attitudes about cleanliness and appearance. Humans have been cleaning their teeth for thousands of years, but not with anything resembling our modern toothbrush. Ancient Egyptians chewed on frayed twigs to clean their teeth, a practice that spread throughout Africa and Asia. These chew sticks were often made from plants with natural antibacterial properties, making them surprisingly effective. The Babylonians and Assyrians used similar methods, often chewing on aromatic twigs that freshened breath while cleaning teeth. In ancient India, The practice of using neem twigs for dental care was established thousands of years ago and continues today. The World Health Organization actually endorses the use of chew sticks in areas where modern toothbrushes aren't available. The first device that we might recognize as a toothbrush appeared in China around 4. These early toothbrushes used bristles from the necks of cold climate pigs, attached to bamboo or bone handles. The stiff pig bristles were effective at removing debris, but were often harsh on gums. Europeans were initially resistant to this Chinese innovation. When traders brought toothbrushes to Europe in the 17th century, they were seen as exotic curiosities rather than practical tools. Europeans preferred tooth powders and cloths for dental cleaning, viewing the Chinese bristle brushes as unnecessarily complicated. The toothbrush's breakthrough in Europe came through an unlikely source: prison ingenuity. In 1770, William Addis was imprisoned in Newgate Prison in London for inciting riots. While in jail, he became frustrated with the common practice of cleaning teeth with rags and salt or soot. Using a small animal bone left over from his meal and bristles he obtained from a guard, Addis created his own toothbrush. After his release, Addis founded a company to manufacture toothbrushes. His design used handles carved from cattle bone with holes drilled to hold tufts of bristles from cows, pigs, or horses. The bristles were tied with wire and sealed with wax. This became the template for toothbrush manufacturing that lasted for over 150 years. Mass production of toothbrushes began in the 19th century, making them more affordable and widely available. However, natural bristles had significant drawbacks. They retained bacteria, didn't dry well, and were difficult to keep clean. The search for alternatives became urgent as understanding of germ theory advanced. World War I inadvertently promoted toothbrush use. Soldiers were issued toothbrushes as part of their personal hygiene kits, and many men encountered toothbrushes for the first time in the military. When they returned home, they brought this habit with them, significantly increasing toothbrush adoption in civilian populations. The revolutionary breakthrough came in 1938 with the invention of nylon by DuPont. Dr. West's Miracle Tuft toothbrush, introduced in 1938, was the first to use synthetic bristles. Nylon bristles were superior in every way. They were more hygienic, dried quickly, were uniform in texture, and could be manufactured to precise specifications. World War II accelerated the adoption of synthetic bristles when natural bristle supplies from Asia were disrupted. Manufacturers were forced to switch to nylon, and users quickly discovered the benefits. By the war's end, most Americans preferred synthetic bristles. The post-war period saw rapid innovation in toothbrush design. Manufacturers experimented with different bristle configurations, handle shapes, and head sizes. The introduction of soft bristles in the 1950s was revolutionary. Previous toothbrushes were quite harsh and could damage tooth enamel and gums with vigorous brushing. Electric toothbrushes were introduced in 1954 by Dr. Philippe Guy Woog in Switzerland. Initially marketed for people with limited mobility, electric toothbrushes gradually gained popularity among general users. The sonic toothbrush, introduced in the 1990s, vibrates at frequencies that create cleaning action beyond the reach of the bristles. The science of toothbrush design has become remarkably sophisticated. Modern toothbrushes are engineered based on extensive research into tooth anatomy, plaque formation, and brushing mechanics. The angle of bristles, the size and shape of the head, and even the texture of the handle are all carefully designed to optimize cleaning effectiveness. Cultural attitudes toward toothbrushes vary significantly worldwide. In many Western countries, having multiple toothbrushes and replacing them frequently is standard. In other cultures, a single toothbrush might be used for years, or traditional cleaning methods might be preferred. The marketing of toothbrushes often reflects these cultural values. The environmental impact of disposable toothbrushes has become a growing concern. Americans alone throw away over 1 billion toothbrushes annually, and most are made from plastics that don't biodegrade. This has led to renewed interest in sustainable alternatives, including bamboo handles and biodegradable bristles. Toothbrush etiquette and storage practices reveal interesting cultural assumptions about hygiene and contamination. The American practice of storing toothbrushes in bathroom medicine cabinets would seem unsanitary to people from cultures where toothbrushes are kept in bedrooms or kitchens, away from bathroom germs. Few objects are as universally recognizable as the umbrella, yet this seemingly simple device represents centuries of engineering innovation and cultural adaptation. The umbrella's history reveals how humans have consistently sought to control their environment, and how a basic need, staying dry, led to remarkable feats of mechanical engineering. The umbrella's origins trace back over 4,000 years to ancient Egypt, Assyria, China, and India. However, these early umbrellas weren't designed for rain protection. They were parasols, used to provide shade from the sun. The word umbrella comes from the Latin umbra, meaning shadow. In ancient Egypt, the umbrella was a symbol of divine power and protection. Goddesses were often depicted holding umbrellas over pharaohs, and the umbrella became associated with the heavens, providing protection to rulers. These early umbrellas were made from stretched papyrus or feathers, and were ceremonial rather than practical. Ancient Chinese umbrellas were the first designed specifically for rain protection. By 2,000 years ago, the Chinese had developed collapsible umbrellas made from bamboo and oiled paper. These were remarkably sophisticated devices that solved many of the engineering challenges that would perplex European umbrella makers centuries later. The umbrella's introduction to Europe reveals fascinating cultural attitudes about gender and propriety. Umbrellas first appeared in ancient Greece and Rome as parasols used exclusively by women for sun protection. Men carrying umbrellas was considered effeminate and inappropriate. This gender association persisted for centuries. In 18th century Europe, umbrellas were still considered feminine accessories. Men who carried umbrellas faced ridicule and suspicion about their masculinity. The breakthrough came from Jonas Harnway, a British philanthropist who began carrying an umbrella in London around 1750, despite facing mockery and even physical harassment. Hanway persisted, and, gradually other men began adopting umbrellas for practical reasons. London's frequent rain made the benefits obvious, even if social conventions were slow to change. By the early 1800s, men's umbrellas had become acceptable, though they were typically black and plain to distinguish them from the colorful parasols used by women. The technical challenges of umbrella design are more complex than they appear. The umbrella must be lightweight enough to carry comfortably, strong enough to withstand wind and rain, compact enough to transport easily, and reliable enough to open and close repeatedly without failure. The rib structure of an umbrella is a masterpiece of engineering. Early umbrellas used whalebone ribs, which were flexible and strong but expensive and difficult to obtain. The development of spring steel ribs in the 19th century made umbrellas more affordable and reliable. The runner and stretcher mechanism that allows umbrellas to open and close smoothly requires precise engineering. The forces involved are significant. A strong wind can exert tremendous pressure on an open umbrella, and the mechanism must distribute this force without breaking. Umbrella fabrics have evolved dramatically over time. Early umbrellas used silk, which was waterproof when properly treated but expensive and delicate. Cotton became popular in the 19th century, often treated with oil or wax for water resistance. Modern synthetic fabrics provide superior water resistance while being lighter and more durable. The invention of the collapsible umbrella in the 20th century solved the problem of portability. These umbrellas fold into compact sizes but require even more sophisticated engineering to maintain strength and reliability. The telescoping handle mechanism uses multiple sliding sections that must lock securely when extended, but slide smoothly when collapsed. The folding ribs must maintain their curved shape when opened, while folding compactly when closed. This requires precise manufacturing tolerances and high-quality materials. Wind resistance became a major design challenge as umbrellas grew larger. The phenomenon of umbrella inversion, where strong winds flip the canopy inside out, led to innovations in rib design and fabric attachment. Some modern umbrellas are designed to invert safely and return to their original shape, while others use venting systems to reduce wind pressure. Cultural variations in umbrella design reflect local climate conditions and social customs. Japanese umbrellas traditionally used bamboo and oil paper, creating distinctive conical shapes that shed rain effectively. British umbrellas emphasized durability and conservative styling. Italian umbrellas focused on fashion and style as much as function. The umbrella industry has faced unique economic challenges. Umbrellas are durable goods that people replace infrequently, yet they're often lost, forgotten, or broken. This has led to interesting business models, from disposable umbrellas sold at transit stations to premium umbrellas designed to last decades. Weather prediction technology has had an unexpected impact on umbrella use. As weather forecasts became more accurate, people could plan their umbrella usage more effectively. Smartphone weather apps have further changed umbrella habits, with some people checking forecasts instead of carrying umbrellas habitually. The physics of how umbrellas work is more complex than simple rain deflection. The curved canopy creates aerodynamic effects that can help or hinder the umbrella's performance. The angle of the ribs affects how water runs off, and the relationship between the handle length and canopy size affects balance and control. Now let's examine one of humanity's most ancient and enduring inventions, the button. These small, seemingly insignificant objects have been with us for thousands of years, yet their impact on fashion, technology, and society has been profound. The humble button has influenced everything from social hierarchies to industrial development. The earliest buttons weren't used for fastening at all. They were decorative elements that showed wealth and status. Archaeological evidence shows that ornamental buttons appeared in the Indus Valley around 2000 AD. These early buttons were made from seashells and had holes drilled through them, but they were sewn onto garments as decoration rather than used with buttonholes. Functional buttons, ones actually used to fasten clothing, didn't appear until much later. The ancient Greeks and Romans used pins, brooches, and ties to fasten their draped garments. The idea of creating a small opening in fabric to accommodate a button was a surprisingly late innovation. The functional button emerged in 13th century Germany, and its introduction coincided with a revolution in European clothing. Medieval garments had been loose-fitting and draped, but buttons enabled the creation of fitted clothing that followed the body's contours. This change in fashion was so significant that it influenced social structures and even religious practices. The Catholic Church initially opposed buttons, considering them symbols of vanity and excess. Some religious orders forbade their use, preferring simple ties or hooks. This resistance wasn't entirely about modesty. Buttons were expensive, and their use indicated wealth, which conflicted with religious vows of poverty. Button making became a specialized craft that required considerable skill. Early buttons were carved from bone, horn, wood, or stone. Metal buttons required metalworking expertise. The most prized buttons were made from precious materials, ivory, silver, or even gems. A wealthy person's buttons could represent a significant portion of their clothing budget. The Industrial Revolution transformed button manufacturing from individual craftsmanship to mass production. In 1807, Aaron Benedict invented a machine for making brass buttons, dramatically reducing their cost. The development of plastic in the 20th century made buttons even more affordable and available in countless colors and styles. The size and placement of buttons reveals fascinating information about historical fashion and social customs. Large buttons were status symbols, they required more material, and were harder to manufacture. The number of buttons on a garment indicated wealth, leading to elaborate designs with dozens of purely decorative buttons. Military uniforms developed their own button conventions that persist today. The number, arrangement, and design of buttons often indicated rank, regiment, or specialty. Naval buttons might feature anchors. Army buttons displayed eagles or crowns. These military traditions influenced civilian fashion, with many button styles originating in military designs. The phrase "push someone's buttons" comes from the early days of electric appliances, when pushing the wrong button could have serious consequences. But buttons had been associated with control and power long before electricity. Medieval nobility used elaborate button codes to signal servants, and button placement on clothing indicated how the garment should be worn or removed. Women's and men's clothing have buttons on opposite sides. Women's buttons are on the left, men's on the right. This difference dates to the days when wealthy women were dressed by servants who found it easier to button garments when the buttons were reversed from their perspective. Men typically dressed themselves, so their buttons remained on the right. The materials used for buttons tell stories of global trade and technological development. Mother-of-pearl buttons required shells from tropical waters, creating international trade networks. Tagua nut buttons used seeds from South American palm trees. During World War II, material shortages led to buttons made from recycled materials, including compressed paper and salvaged plastics. Button collecting became a serious hobby in the 19th and 20th centuries. Rare buttons, particularly those with historical significance or unusual materials, can command high prices. The National Button Society, founded in 1938, maintains extensive records of button types, materials, and manufacturing techniques. The engineering of buttonholes is more sophisticated than it appears. The size must be precisely calculated to allow the button to pass through while maintaining a secure closure. The reinforcement stitching must be strong enough to withstand repeated use without fraying. Machine-made buttonholes required the development of specialized sewing techniques and equipment. Modern button technology has expanded beyond simple mechanical closures. Snap buttons use spring mechanisms for quick fastening. Magnetic buttons eliminate the need for buttonholes entirely. Electronic buttons can include LED lights or even digital displays, though these remain novelties rather than practical clothing elements. Environmental concerns have brought new attention to button materials and manufacturing. Traditional materials like horn and shell are renewable but require animal products. Synthetic materials are durable but may not biodegrade. Some manufacturers are experimenting with biodegradable plastics and sustainably harvested natural materials. After the knife, the spoon was likely humanity's second eating implement, and its development tells the story of our evolving relationship with food, craftsmanship, and social customs. Unlike the controversial fork, the spoon was universally accepted and became an essential tool in virtually every culture worldwide. The spoon's origins are lost in prehistory, but archaeological evidence suggests that humans have been using spoon-like implements for at least 25. The earliest spoons were probably large shells, naturally cupped stones, or pieces of wood carved into bowl shapes. The word spoon itself comes from cochlea, the Latin word for snail shell. Different cultures developed spoons independently, but the basic design remained remarkably consistent, a shallow bowl attached to a handle. This consistency suggests that the spoon's design is nearly optimal for its function, which is why it has changed so little over millennia. Ancient Egyptian spoons were often elaborate works of art, carved from ivory, wood, or precious metals, and decorated with religious symbols or hieroglyphs. These spoons weren't just functional tools, they were status symbols and religious artifacts. Wealthy Egyptians were buried with ornate spoons for use in the afterlife. Greek and Roman spoons revealed social hierarchies through their materials and designs. Wealthy Romans used silver or gold spoons, while common people made do with wood, bone, or bronze. The Romans developed different spoon shapes for different purposes: broad, shallow spoons for soup, smaller spoons for sauces, and tiny spoons for eggs or delicate foods. Medieval European spoons were typically made from wood, horn, or pewter. Silver spoons were luxury items owned only by the wealthy, giving rise to the expression "born with a silver spoon in your mouth." The gift of a silver spoon to a newborn was considered a blessing for prosperity and good fortune. The craftsmanship required to make medieval spoons was considerable. Wooden spoons had to be carved from a single piece of wood, carefully shaped to avoid weak points where the bowl met the handle. The wood had to be seasoned properly to prevent cracking, and the finish had to be smooth enough to be comfortable against the lips. Apostle spoons became popular in medieval and Renaissance Europe. These ornate silver spoons featured handles topped with figures of the 12 apostles, plus a master spoon, featuring Jesus Christ. Complete sets were extremely valuable, and were often given as christening gifts, with the child receiving the spoon bearing their patron saint. The standardization of spoon sizes came surprisingly late in history. Medieval spoons varied dramatically in size and capacity, depending on the maker's preferences and intended use. The development of standard measurements for cooking led to demands for consistent spoon sizes, eventually giving us the teaspoon and tablespoon measurements still used today. Spoon etiquette developed elaborate rules that varied by culture and social class. In some societies, sharing spoons was considered intimate and was only appropriate between family members. In others, communal eating with shared spoons was the norm. The way someone held a spoon could indicate their social background and education. The Industrial Revolution mechanized spoon production, making them affordable for ordinary people. Machine-made spoons were more uniform than handcrafted ones, but initially lacked the character and individuality of artisan-made pieces. Some people considered machine-made spoons inferior, preferring the slight irregularities that indicated human craftsmanship. Silver-plated spoons, introduced in the 19th century, democratized elegant dining. These spoons looked like solid silver, but cost a fraction of the price. The silver plating process had to be carefully controlled to ensure durability. Too thin, and the plating would wear off quickly. Too thick, and the cost savings would be lost. Stainless steel revolutionized spoon manufacturing in the 20th century. Stainless steel spoons were hygienic, durable, and didn't require polishing like silver. They could be mass-produced efficiently, and were dishwasher safe. The introduction of stainless steel made matching silverware sets affordable for middle-class families. Specialized spoons developed for specific foods and purposes. Soup spoons are larger and rounder than teaspoons. Dessert spoons fall between teaspoons and tablespoons in size. Serving spoons are designed for transferring food, rather than eating. Each variation represents centuries of refinement for specific purposes. Cultural differences in spoon use reveal varying attitudes toward food and dining. In some Asian cultures, ceramic or wooden spoons are preferred over metal ones because they don't conduct heat and won't burn the lips when eating hot soup. Some cultures use flat spoons that are better for certain types of food preparation or consumption. The physics of spoon design involves complex considerations of capacity, leverage, and ergonomics. The bowl must be deep enough to hold liquid without being so deep that it's difficult to empty completely. The handle must be long enough to provide good control, but not so long that it's unwieldy. The weight distribution must feel balanced in the hand. The mirror might be the most psychologically complex object in our daily lives. Every morning, millions of people begin their day by looking into a mirror, yet few consider the remarkable history of this simple reflective surface. The mirror's development parallels humanity's evolving understanding of optics, chemistry, and even psychology. Before manufactured mirrors, humans saw their reflections in still water, polished metals, and volcanic glass. These natural mirrors were unreliable and often distorted, making clear self-perception impossible. The quest for better reflective surfaces drove technological innovation for thousands of years. The earliest manufactured mirrors were made from polished obsidian, a volcanic glass that could be worked to a smooth reflective surface. These mirrors, dating back 8,000 years, have been found in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. Obsidian mirrors were precious objects, often buried with their owners or used in religious ceremonies. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans made mirrors from polished metal, typically bronze, silver, or gold. These metal mirrors required constant polishing to maintain their reflective properties, and were expensive enough that only the wealthy could afford them. The quality of reflection was poor by modern standards, but they were marvels of ancient technology. The Romans were the first to recognize that adding a backing material could improve a mirror's reflective properties. They experimented with various metals and techniques, sometimes achieving surprisingly good results. Roman mirrors were often decorated with elaborate handles and frames, making them as much art objects as functional tools. The breakthrough in mirror technology came from medieval Islamic and European glassmakers, who discovered how to apply metallic coatings to glass. Early glass mirrors used tin and mercury amalgam as the reflective backing. These mirrors provided much clearer reflections than polished metal, but were extremely dangerous to manufacture due to mercury poisoning. Venetian glassmakers on the island of Murano perfected mirror-making techniques in the 16th century, creating mirrors so superior that they dominated European markets for centuries. The Venetians guarded their secrets jealously, making it illegal for mirror makers to leave the island, and maintaining a virtual monopoly on high-quality mirrors. The Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, completed in 1684, represented the pinnacle of mirror craftsmanship and became a symbol of royal power and wealth. The hall contained 357 mirrors, an almost unimaginable display of luxury at the time. The mirrors were so valuable that they cost more than the palace's paintings and sculptures combined. The invention of the silvering process in 1835 by German chemist Justus von Liebig revolutionized mirror production. This process used silver nitrate to create a reflective coating on glass, producing mirrors that were clearer, more durable, and less toxic to manufacture than mercury-based mirrors. Mass production of mirrors in the 19th and 20th centuries made them affordable household items. What had once been luxury objects owned only by the wealthy became common in middle-class homes. This democratization of mirrors had profound social and psychological effects. The psychological impact of widespread mirror availability changed human behavior and self-perception. For the first time in history, people could see themselves clearly and frequently. This led to increased attention to personal appearance, and may have contributed to the development of modern concepts of fashion and beauty standards. Mirrors played crucial roles in scientific development. They were essential for telescopes, microscopes, and optical experiments. The quality of mirrors often limited the advancement of optical science. The development of telescope mirrors required new techniques for creating large, perfectly smooth reflective surfaces. The superstitions and folklore surrounding mirrors revealed deep-seated human anxieties about self-perception and mortality. The belief that mirrors reflect the soul, that breaking a mirror brings bad luck, or that vampires cast no reflection, all speak to the mysterious relationship between mirrors and identity. Modern mirror manufacturing involves sophisticated chemistry and precision engineering. The glass must be perfectly flat and smooth, the reflective coating must be uniform and durable, and protective backing layers must prevent corrosion. High-quality mirrors undergo rigorous testing for clarity, durability, and color accuracy. Specialized mirrors serve countless purposes beyond personal grooming. Astronomical mirrors must be perfect to within tiny fractions of a wavelength of light. Laser mirrors must withstand intense heat without distorting. Security mirrors use convex surfaces to provide wide-angle views. Each application requires specific engineering solutions. The environmental impact of mirror production includes energy-intensive glass manufacturing, chemical processing for reflective coatings, and disposal challenges for old mirrors. Some modern mirrors use aluminum coatings instead of silver to reduce cost and environmental impact, though this sometimes affects image quality. One-way mirrors, despite their name, don't actually allow vision in only one direction. They work by having different lighting levels on each side. The brighter side sees its own reflection, while the darker side can see through. This principle has applications in security, psychology experiments, and entertainment. The future of mirror technology includes smart mirrors that can display information, change, reflectivity, or even show enhanced images. Some experimental mirrors can correct for vision problems or provide augmented reality overlays. Though these remain largely experimental, we end our journey with something that quite literally keeps us grounded: the shoelace. This simple cord has been with us for thousands of years, yet its design continues to evolve. The shoelace represents humanity's endless quest to solve practical problems with elegant solutions, and its history reveals surprising connections to fashion, functionality, and even social status. Before shoelaces, humans secured footwear with various methods depending on available materials and local customs. Some cultures use strips of leather or plant fibers wrapped around the foot and ankle. Others employed toggles, buttons, or simple slip-on designs that required no fastening at all. The earliest known leather shoe with lacing eyelets dates back 5,500 years and was discovered in an Armenian cave. This remarkably well-preserved shoe used a leather thong laced through slits cut in the leather, demonstrating that humans recognized the advantages of adjustable footwear very early in our history. Ancient Romans developed sophisticated lacing systems for their sandals and boots, particularly military footwear. Roman soldiers' boots, called caligae, used complex lacing patterns that provided support, protection, and durability. These lacing techniques were so effective that many are still used today. The word shoelace didn't appear in English until the 14th century, derived from the Middle English lazen meaning snare or cord. Before this, various terms described shoe fastenings: shoestring, bootlace, or simply lace. The terminology reflects the evolution of both footwear and the materials used to secure it. Medieval shoemaking guilds developed standardized lacing techniques that became closely guarded trade secrets. Master craftsmen created elaborate patterns that were both functional and decorative. The complexity of a shoe's lacing could indicate the wearer's social status and the cobbler's skill level. The Industrial Revolution mechanized shoelace production, making them cheaper and more widely available. Machine-made laces were more uniform than handcrafted ones, but early machines couldn't replicate the subtle variations in tension and thickness that made handmade laces superior for certain applications. The invention of metal eyelets in 1823 by Harvey Kennedy revolutionized shoe design. Before eyelets, laces passed through simple holes or slits in leather, which would eventually tear from repeated use. Metal eyelets distributed stress and prevented tearing, making shoes more durable and allowing for tighter, more secure lacing. Shoelace materials have evolved dramatically over time. Early laces were made from leather strips, plant fibers, or sinew. Cotton became popular in the 18th and 19th centuries, offering better grip and durability than many alternatives. Synthetic materials, like nylon and polyester, introduced in the 20th century, provided superior strength and weather resistance. The aglet, the small plastic or metal tip on a shoelace, serves crucial functions beyond just making threading easier. Aglets prevent fraying and maintain the lace's shape, significantly extending its useful life. The word comes from the French aiguillette, meaning needle, reflecting the aglet's role in helping the lace penetrate eyelets. Different lacing patterns serve various functional and aesthetic purposes. Straight bar lacing provides a clean, formal appearance and even pressure distribution. Criss-cross lacing offers the best combination of security and adjustability. Ladder lacing, used in military and hiking boots, provides maximum tightness and support. Athletic footwear drove innovation in shoelace technology throughout the 20th century. Sport-specific requirements led to elastic laces for running shoes, extra strong laces for basketball shoes, and quick-release systems for various sports. Each innovation addressed specific performance needs. The physics of shoelace knots has attracted serious scientific study. The common bow knot is actually a complex, topological structure. The way the loops and ends interact determines whether the knot will hold securely or come undone unexpectedly. Cultural attitudes toward shoelace tying reveal interesting social norms and expectations. Children learning to tie shoes marks an important developmental milestone. The ability to tie one's own shoes represents independence and self-sufficiency. Some cultures have elaborate customs around gifting special laces or teaching specific knotting techniques. Slip-on shoes and alternative fastening systems have challenged the shoelace's dominance in recent decades. Velcro, elastic systems, and innovative toggle mechanisms offer convenience advantages over traditional lacing. However, laces remain popular because they provide superior adjustability and security. The environmental impact of shoelace production is relatively small but not insignificant. Synthetic laces require petroleum-based materials, while cotton laces need agricultural resources. The durability of quality laces means they're replaced infrequently, reducing their overall environmental footprint compared to many other manufactured goods. Specialty applications have driven continued innovation in shoelace design. Reflective laces improve visibility for runners and cyclists. Elastic laces help people with mobility challenges. Antimicrobial treatments prevent odor and bacteria growth. LED-embedded laces provide novelty lighting effects, though these remain more gimmick than practical improvement. The mathematics of optimal lacing has been studied extensively, with researchers determining the most efficient patterns for different shoe types and foot shapes. The shortest shoelace problem involves finding the lacing pattern that uses the minimum length of lace while maintaining security and adjustability. As we reach the end of our journey through the sleepy history of everyday things, I hope you've gained a new appreciation for the remarkable stories hidden in plain sight all around us. From the paperclip on your desk to the shoelaces on your feet, every mundane object carries within it the accumulated wisdom, creativity, and ingenuity of countless generations. These seemingly simple objects represent triumph over technical challenges that puzzled brilliant minds for centuries. They embody cultural values, social hierarchies, and aesthetic preferences that shaped entire civilizations. They tell stories of international trade, industrial innovation, and the endless human drive to make life a little bit easier, safer, or more beautiful. The next time you zip up a jacket, turn a doorknob, or tie your shoes, remember that you're using tools that represent the collective problem-solving efforts of humanity across millennia. These objects are so well designed, so perfectly suited to their purposes, that we rarely think about them at all. But that invisibility is actually their greatest achievement. They work so well that they disappear into the background of daily life. Every mundane object around you has a story worth telling. The keyboard you're typing on, the chair you're sitting in, the light switch on the wall, each represents centuries of refinement and innovation. They are the products of countless experiments, failures, and breakthroughs by people whose names we'll never know but whose contributions we use every single day. In our modern world of rapid technological change and digital innovation, it's easy to overlook these fundamental tools that make daily life possible. But perhaps that's exactly why their stories matter. They remind us that progress isn't always about the latest gadget or revolutionary breakthrough. Sometimes the most important innovations are the quiet ones, the small improvements that make life a little bit better for everyone. Everyday things, and trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll never look at a paperclip, a doorknob, or even your morning coffee cup the same way again.